I bring to each one of you with the dreams, hopes, aspirations that we all share. On this pleasant morning, I, Rutuja, feel honored to welcome our very special guest for today, Dr. Terry Wetzel from Virginia, who will be delivering a talk on Mahatma Gandhi's concepts of nonviolence and its relevance in present context. Gandhiji's philosophy of nonviolence attained a special status. He made us understand that nonviolence is not a weapon of weak. It is a weapon which can be tried by all. This philosophy has inspired many, and Professor Terry Wetzel is the follower of this Gandhian philosophy of nonviolence and also works in this field. Now, it's time for an introductory remark. I would like to welcome the Director of Prerna College of Commerce, Dr. Praveen Joshi, sir, to please speak few words. Over to Dr. Praveen Joshi, sir.
Good morning, everybody, and good evening to Professor Terry. It's wonderful to have my friend Professor Terry here with us this morning to address us on the concept of non-violence of Gandhiji and its relevance in the present times. I welcome Professor Terry here, and first of all, I would like to thank him that he has accepted our invitation, and even it's late night hours there in Virginia, he has agreed to deliver his address for our students. I'm sure that our students are going to be benefited immensely from his talk, and they will learn many lessons for their rest of the life. He is a scholar par excellence, and he has studied Gandhiji in great depth. So his knowledge on Gandhiji is just like a kind of university. And today we are going to get a lot from his address. Gandhiji's concept of non-violence is very unique. It's not only avoiding violence, physical violence. It is also avoiding mental and emotional violence. Gandhiji used to say that non-violence is not the weapon of a weak person. It's a weapon of the strong, of the brave. If you are adopting to non-violence just because you cannot do anything, that is not really the philosophy of non-violence. Non-violence is not the weapon of any person who accepts it out of weakness. Non-violence requires a kind of mental, emotional, and psychological strength. That is the gist of that. Gandhiji used to advise us not even to be violent mentally or emotionally. Even hating somebody else is a kind of violence. If you are hating somebody, your mind is disturbed and you are causing violence to yourself. Therefore, Gandhiji advised us even to give up the feeling of hatred. When we got freedom from the British, it was not out of hatred. He never hated the British. He loved them. He said, love and love will win ultimately. I don't want to speak more on this. We have a very eminent guest here, my dear friend, Professor Terry Wetzel, and we will listen a lot from him. So it's time for him. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Back to Rutuja.
Thank you so much, sir, for the delightful start of this program. Now, let me have the privilege to welcome and introduce our today's guest, Dr. Terry Betzel, the dynamic and the splendid personality who is the Professor of Justice Studies and Director of Mahatma Gandhi Center for Global Nonviolence at James Madison University. He is the editor-in-chief of International Journal on Responsibility and editor of the International Journal of Peace Research. He works in the field of nonviolence, social and political theory, transitional justice, and restorative justice. He has graduate degrees from George Mason University, Conflict Analysis and Resolution, and Harvard University History of Science. Professor Witzel has published a number of articles, chapters, and books on these topics and has worked in Africa and Eastern Europe, specifically on transitional justice. He co-edited two books about Gandhiji that will be published in Delhi in a few weeks. He spent last March in Maharashtra and met many wonderful people and hopes to return when the pandemic is over. It's really an honor to have such a remarkable personality with us today. And I'm sure everybody is excited to listen our today's distinguished guest. I would like to thank you, sir, for taking the time out of your heavy schedule and marking the spectacular morning with your glorious presence. Now, on behalf of my college, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Terry Betzel to please enlighten us with your talk. Over to Dr. Terry Betzel.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And first of all, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm not sure that I deserve all of this praise because I'm not sure I'm worthy of that. But anyway, I'm very honored to be here, and I thank you for the invitation. Um, and it's been several months since well, half a year. I was in Nagpur in March for a symposium. So I think the most remarkable thing I met there were the people, the friendliest and generous and just welcoming, hospitable people that it was such a wonderful place to be. So thank you for the invitation. Um, I am both honored and humbled to be here. So I will start. MK Gandhi has helped me to understand things that I believed. He helped me to understand why I believed them. I always thought killing other people was wrong. I would say things like, I could never kill someone if I wasn't sure, and I said this in a very Christian way, uh, I could never kill someone if I wasn't sure that they could go to heaven. My nephew, when he was about 8 years old, enlightened me. And he said, well, Uncle, I could never kill someone even if I knew they were going to heaven. So we always have a way of learning. And I think we should always be open to learning, which Gandhi very much was. So I really did believe in nonviolence, but I couldn't explain why. And Gandhi helped me to understand this. He studied peace. For example, an eye for an eye makes the whole world credible. When I studied, I took a little bit slowly. I know I have a very odd accent, so my apologies, but I will send it later for anyone that's still my so I will say another time, but I think just we must be creative and just look for alternatives. find better ways. Story probably uh, so my great grand day after day to set a trap. The following morning, when the Miller family was at eating breakfast, they heard a shout coming from the direction of the place where they store the corn. And he said, he hurried up to go outside, and he saw a man trapped in the crib, in the corn box. So he said, "Good morning. Can I help you?" And the man said, "Yes, can you release me from this trap?" And he said, "Oh, are you trapped?" And he said, "Yes." And so Benedict, this farmer, informed the trespasser that he would let him go on one condition. And that man would have to share breakfast, come inside the house and share breakfast with the farmer and his large family. So the man agreed, and it's told that at the breakfast table, the family talked about all kinds of things, events of the day, but they never mentioned the missing corn. So they just welcomed him in like hospitality, like another guest. And after breakfast, Benedict followed him outside and gave him a bag of corn and said, "Here, this is my gift to you. Maybe you need this." And so after that, there was no missing corn. And I think this is one of the ways, these kinds of experiments that Gandhi would do, that helps me to understand, because I think this is a very good way that Gandhi would have tried to experiment and to try something different. And I think that's, one of the things we always have to understand is there's always a better way to do things, and we have to be creative. And so Gandhi really helped me to understand why this story is so powerful. And I will just move on here to another example that I will give. And this is when, it's a very simple story again, but when my daughter was in the second grade, her name is Myra, and she came home from school very frustrated. Her math assignment was to solve a simple addition problem. Here was the problem. If your grandmother gives you a guinea pig and your uncle gives you a guinea pig, how many guinea pigs do you have? And her answer was 3. So her grandmother gave her a guinea pig, her uncle gave her a guinea pig. How many guinea pigs do you have? Her answer was 3. And she considered that to be the correct answer. In fact, it was the correct answer. Because according to the math key, it was wrong. And according to the teacher, it was wrong. But why was it the correct answer? Because she already had a guinea pig at home. So she had a guinea pig. So adding two more made three. And so she was very frustrated. So I think just the point I want to make with that story is that I think oftentimes what's missing when we think about how we treat other people and who other people are, and when we think about the answers that we might have, that we might be missing very key elements of the context and the life history of others. So this is, briefly, I think this is a key concept, and obviously in Gandhian thought, and in a key concept in many other philosophies, but especially Gandhi, that it means a person or a group rather than oneself. Okay, the other. So I shall return to this a bit, but I think the key idea here is this awareness that some people have a different context. They live in a different world than we do. And we might think they have the wrong answer when in fact they might have the right answer. So I think the first stage here is just being aware, this awareness that we might be wrong. Okay? And I think this is where I am very hopeful for the young generation, because I think the young generation now is very aware to the extent that few generations have been before. That far too many for far too many people, the context of life history of the global system is actually living under oppression. And I think, more young people are aware of this. And here's the one thing, I think there's an irony here, that the pandemic, which was starting and things were closing down soon after I left Nagpur to go to another part of India. So I think the pandemic itself has given many people an opportunity to take a step back and to reevaluate what kind of social world are we living in? And I think many young people, especially, are doing much more to overcome the destructive aspects of considering others that are different from us. So I say this because I see many young people as very concerned for the welfare of others. For example, the massive and ongoing protests in the United States and other parts of the world that concern police violence. So I think, and oppression of the state. So I think this is one area where where younger people have a much greater sense of responsibility. And here I think, that's another key concept for Gandhi, this idea that we don't have rights without responsibilities. And so we must learn why a person might answer that they have 3 guinea pigs. Okay, because in our minds, that's a completely wrong answer. But for my daughter, that was the right answer. So youth, I think, are realizing that others may have very different life stories and life histories. And I think here, one thing, the face mask that many people wear now is the best example of this kind of Gandhian responsibility. Because I wear a mask to protect you and others. Others wear a mask to protect me, which is very, very different than this kind of normal American way of looking at the world. I do things for me, you do things for you. But the pandemic has showed us that no, I need to do things for your health, and you need to do things for my health. And that's something very different, especially in the United States. I think maybe Nagpur might be a much more generous state. So I think what's happening here is that rather trying to puzzle solve and to fit within a system, people are problem solving. So puzzle solving means they have a set of pieces and they try to fit them together. But problem solving is what Gandhi is really talking about. And I think here's where we're understanding that the system itself needs to change, that it's not just figuring out how to work within a system, but it's figuring out that the system itself has problems. And so I think one way, to do this is we need to ask new questions. So, for example, I think here's just one question that just occurred to me several weeks ago when I was thinking about this. And I think these are the ways we can start to change, is to start to say there are different ways we can look at the world. So, number one, why does it cost thousands of dollars, US dollars, to be a qualified nurse, to serve, or a teacher? It costs thousands of dollars in the United States to get that training and that certification. Yet in the United States, people are paid to train how to kill each other in the military. So in the military, people trade for they get paid a salary to learn how to kill each other. But in the United States, we nurses and teachers have to pay money to be certified to have a job. So I think that's, there are many different, all sorts of questions we can ask. And I think this comes to a really big question then, is how am I participating in this system? In a system that oppresses others. And this gets much closer to the idea of Gandhian systems change. For example, he asked how 100,000 British, how can they control millions of Indians? And his answer was through the cooperation of the Indian citizens. And he's saying, therefore, he called for, as you know, massive and coordinated, nonviolent, and these were very effective. And those methods have been used all over the world now. So, maybe stated in a different way, in a kind of justice way, is that, I think people are really starting to understand and shift what they mean by justice. No longer is justice primarily understood as the threat or the use of force and punishment because of the violation of the law. Rather, the younger people, the youth, the college students are starting to understand that unjust laws must be changed and should not be followed. And so justice, I think, is better understood as procedural justice, as who makes decisions and how are decisions made, and distributive justice. How do we fairly allocate the costs and benefits of living in society? So these are three very different ways of working with rather than working with the concept of peace. I think Gandhi has helped me to understand how to work with this ongoing project of justice. And I think one thing, that one big question then becomes, what are we willing to give up to work constructively with each other? And I think this is a very big question. And I'm not claiming to have all of the answers. I'm looking for your generation to provide some of those answers. What are you willing to give up to work constructively with each other? And here I will give another example from one of my favorite professors. He was the Harvard chaplain. His name was Peter Gomes. And he said something that has stayed with me for over 20 years now. And he says, and I'm speaking in a very Christian language now, but he said, the devil does not bother to tempt us in areas of our weaknesses. We are perfectly human there to sin all by ourselves. And here's where the irony comes in. It is in our righteousness, in our virtues, where we believe we cannot possibly be wrong, that we are most easily deceived. So this is a very simple, very similar quote to, from Gandhi that I read at the Viceroy's Palace in Pune several months ago. And here's the quote from Gandhi: "We should learn to magnify our errors so we can continually learn from them." And I think this is very much what the minister was talking about, because we so easily deceive ourselves with our own virtues, and too easily discard the fact that we are traveling in society with other people, and many of whom we don't like very much. Many of the people that we're traveling with are people that we actually may not like very much. When we disagree with others, the normal and easiest thing to do is to point out how and why they are wrong, right? That's our kind of natural compulsion. Here's why you were wrong. But how should we move forward if we begin with this idea that we might be wrong? And that's one of my starting points in some of my writings that I'm still working on. They've been in other places. But I start with this assumption that everyone has limited knowledge, including myself. I have limited knowledge. I am fallible. I could be wrong. So if I accept that I might be wrong, what approach can help to guide social action? If I start with this idea that I could be wrong, how am I to move and act in the world? Because I say, and here, of course, I think the very most simple and straightforward answer is what Gandhi does. He relies on nonviolence, because if we are wrong, we do not harm others. Realizing that they do have rights, but also that we have responsibility to others. And I think many, as I mentioned earlier, youth are really asking this question. So, this idea that I might be wrong, can then lead us to a deeper question of how might I be cooperating with a system that is oppressing so many people, especially systemic oppression in the United States right now of people of color that has been going on for 400 years. So if I am living in a democracy, then to some extent, I incur some responsibility for how the institutions of my government treat other people. So I think this is one of the key things that we really need to understand, is especially for white people, is how white people have been compliant because they have not been oppressed in the same way, and they don't need to answer the same kind of questions. I know the situation's a bit different in India, but I think this is important, that in a democracy, it's not simply a matter of voting. For example, to some degree, we all have political responsibility for the actions of those who have been elected in government. So I, to some degree, have responsibility for the actions of President Trump. As much as I may not like that, to some degree, I am responsible for that. And we can argue about how much responsibility and what that means, but to some degree, in a democracy, I do have some responsibility for that. So, we all incur, and that's what I've called in other places political responsibility. And to some degree, I think we all incur what I've referred to as moral responsibility for when we fail to act, when we know something might be wrong and we know it's probably not a good thing, and we choose to do nothing. We choose not to strive for justice, to strive for the right thing, to strive to make for a better world. We just kind of sit back and we just learn, you know put up with the injustice because it really doesn't impact my life very much. So I will just forget about it. And I think this is one of the biggest injustices, is when we just fail to do nothing about it. And I've written on this before, so I won't go over all of the details, and I don't have too much further to go. So just in case you're wondering, but anyway, I think to some extent we incur future responsibility, and by future responsibility, I mean it is how our social actions, how they impact others, and how they impact others in the future, and how they impact grandchildren of other people. How they impact future generations. And I think that's one big responsibility that we seldom think about. I mean, we usually think about, well, here's my life, my world, and what kind of responsibility do I have just for myself, and to take care of myself and my friends and my family. But we might not think, what about future generations? How do we care for the earth? These kinds of things. So I want to return again now to a big question, and that is, what are we willing to give up to make society better? And I think this is a very big question. And I don't claim to have all of the answers, but here I believe we are faced with two big questions, or two big issues. To quote Gandhi, and here's the quote: we must search for wealth not in the bowels of the earth, but in the hearts of other people. The true law of economics is that people should be maintained in the best possible health, both in mind and body, and the highest honor. So the wealth is not in the earth. That's not how we should define it. We should define wealth by human prosperity, by human capability. Okay? So wealth should be in other people, not in material things. And I think this is easier to understand than to practice, especially the other part. How do we envision other people and promote the wealth of others? Aren't other people often the problem, especially those we disagree with? And here's Gandhi saying they're the solution, but I think for many of us, they're actually the problem. So we need to learn how to, talk about social conflict, and that the discovery of truth is not always pleasant. Interconnectedness is well established among social scientists, and I will not elaborate here. In terms of conflict is inevitable and should not always be avoided. Conflict can be very healthy. Conflict can be an engine that overcomes abuse and oppression and drives to healthier interactions. So conflict is not easy to deal with. However, I think we can and should learn how to deal with it better. This is where the phrase I started with. We should illuminate. We should lighten it up. We should shine a light on conflict, not eliminate conflict. We should illuminate it and deal with it. We should study it and appreciate it more, not less. Nonviolent conflict, to me, is a very can be very constructive because it nurtures, it respects, it understands, and builds others and oneself in the process of conflict. On the other hand, and these are Gandhian principles, that violence actually destroys, disrespects, cares not to understand, and tears the other person in the process of conflict. So nonviolence is constructive. And here I think it's important that ending one conflict merely sets the stage for another conflict. To be a living human being is to feel and understand experience. We seldom share those experiences exactly with others. Similar to how many guinea pigs do you have? My daughter her answer was 3, so we need to constantly adjust since even the most healthy conflict processes and outcomes will undoubtedly have some negative, unintended consequences that lead to new conflict. So here again, just to reiterate that, the point is not to eliminate conflict, but to illuminate its healthy aspects and diminish the negative aspects. Nonviolence, I think here, and especially Gandhian nonviolence, illuminates the healthy aspects and diminishes the unhealthy aspects. And I think here, human conflict never ends. We never reach the end of it. If no conflict exists between parties, then one party is either irrelevant or is extremely oppressed. Therefore, I seldom, if ever, use the word peace. I prefer the term justice. Peace is a temporary settlement, a temporary state, where I believe that justice, and I think this is very Gandhian as well, that justice is other concerning, and therefore it's open-ended, it's ongoing. So as I mentioned earlier, different forms of justice exist. So many of the more popular ones are punitive and revenge seeking. But this is not the form of justice of which I'm talking about. Rather, I prefer to understand justice, and I think Gandhi would too, as procedural justice, because procedural justice deals with who makes decisions and how decisions are made. And also distributive justice. What are the standards of the allocation of costs and benefits of living in a society? So here I would say that just, with this ongoing Gandhian ideas of social life, that society is an ongoing project rather than something that has a solution, right? There's no solution. It's just how to make it better. So if I return to this concept of the other, right, that we tend to think, and I think here probably the most difficult and unhealthy aspect of conflict is to admit that the other person might be right and that I might be wrong. I think that is one of the hardest things to deal with, one of the hardest ideas. And here again, I'm just repeating Gandhi, that I think his very important point, that we must learn to magnify our errors. Everyone is fallible, including me. So what tends to happen is we assume that I'm right, they're wrong. But we seldom acknowledge that even if they are wrong, it does not mean that I am right. We could both be wrong. And chances are, most likely, we are both partially right and both partially wrong. So I think that's why, from a very Gandhian idea, we must see the humanness in ourselves in the same way that we see the humanness in other people. We, at best, can only hold part of the truth. So the solution in society is usually some collaboration between very different parts in a conflict, and it is likely that the outcome neither party of the conflict saw at the beginning. That it's so we must be willing to problem solve with others and be creative, because most often it's probably the solution is probably not something that either side, either parts of a conflict have uh, thought about. So here I'm getting close to wrapping up. That human conflicts don't really end; they just take other forms. Conflict itself is not good or bad. It is how we handle conflicts, how we deal with others that really matters. Sometimes issues of oppression need to be addressed and require conflict. So oftentimes we must build a conflict. We must bring it to the surface. We must build a conflict in order to resolve it. Okay? So the value of nonviolence here is that in the process of dealing with the conflict nonviolently, we can learn to transform ourselves and to build relationships through the process of dealing with a problem rather than destroying others. So I'm very close to the end now. Number one, I see human social life is an ongoing project. We never reach utopia. Perhaps we should work towards justice rather than peace. So we can always make a better world. And we should always try to make a better world. Even if we cannot make a perfect world, we can make a better world. Number two, nonviolence is the better means for illuminating conflict and achieving justice. Because nonviolence, we do not destroy, right? We illuminate and learn through nonviolence. Number three, here's something I haven't talked on yet. Well, I'll go. Number three, I have talked on, and that's what are we willing to give up to make a better society? And here I think the final point is, and it's one of the reasons I'm very hopeful, is that I believe the bigger the challenge, the bigger the opportunity. So your generation which is one reason I have a lot of optimism for your generation, because I think you are now faced with incredible challenges. This pandemic is a big challenge. It's huge. And it's showing the cracks in the system, that many systems are oppressive and don't work very well. So it's illuminating those. So now is the time to rebuild them, to say, okay, this is wrong. And this pandemic, I think, is the perfect time to build them, because we can see that the real problems are in these social systems and social structures. So how can we change them? And that's where I think maybe I will just let it there. I wasn't really sure how long I was supposed to speak. So I just kind of did about a 45-minute talk. I hope that's okay. I'm happy to hang around for a bit if you like. But here I really want, if nothing else, I want you to think about that. And, that this could be your life, is the bigger the challenge, the bigger the opportunity to make a change. So, and I think that's I'm not quoting Gandhi, but I would say that, I borrowed that from Gandhi, I think, or from reading Gandhi. So I will simply end there. I don't know if that is enough time, or if I took too much time or not enough time. So I'm very happy to have more conversations, or to let you go to another class. I don't know where you are in the day. So thank you.
So it's wonderful session.
Oh, thank you. I never know exactly what to say,
And
and
I felt like listening and listening and listening. It was
okay.
so captivating. I think we could have listened to you for so many hours continuously. It has been so wonderful delivery.
Okay. Well, I hope I tried to talk slowly enough. I know I have a strange accent,
The
so
bigger the challenge, the greater the opportunity. That's the
okay.
best thing we have learned today from you.
Okay.
And conflict must be there, but it has to be resolved non-violently.
Yes.
Without conflict, we are not alive.
Yes.
Yes,
Sorry,
Rotuja.
my dog has a toy and he's making some noise, and I'm going to try to let him out of the bedroom, out of the house. Okay.
Rotuja.
Okay. My apologies. I had to.
No, it's okay,
The,
sir. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
the dog
Rotuja, please
was
go ahead.
annoying.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What a wonderful session it was. Thank you so much, sir, for such an enriching session. The feeling of oneness that we all were drawn to made a remark. I'm sure your talk will immensely benefit each one of us. You told us how Gandhiji helped you understand to get a better way, how pandemic has changed the behavior of people where we used to do things for ourselves, but now we
Mhm.
have developed the thinking so that we can take efforts to protect others, to be aware, and should learn to magnify our errors. We should
Yes.
illuminate healthy aspects and diminish the negative aspects. This shows that we are somewhere following the Gandhian principles. It was
Yes.
really a mesmerizing session. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable time. Now,
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yes,
Oh no, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
thank you, sir. Now, let me invite the officiating principal of Prerna College of Commerce, Dr. Bharti Deshmukh ma'am, to please propose a vote of thanks. Over to Dr. Bharti Deshmukh ma'am.
Thank you, Rutuja Madam. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this memorable webinar. I, Bharti Deshmukh, on behalf of Prerna College of Commerce, Department of Computer Application, welcome you all in this beautiful morning. First and foremost, I thank our honorable speaker, Professor Terry Bretzel, who is a professor of Justice Studies at James Madison University, Virginia, who, in spite of his busy schedule, has found time to grace this webinar and immensely enlighten all our students on the topic Mahatma Gandhi concepts of nonviolence and its relevance in the present context. Sir, it was a wonderful experience listening to you on this occasion. The way you explained about nonviolence, giving various small examples, was really very amazing. It was really wonderful to listen to you. To express our profound thankfulness to you for your kind address. Thank you so much, sir.
Oh, thank you, and thank you so much for your time and for allowing me to speak. And
It was
you know, I have so much to learn yet
it
from
was a
people
pleasure
like
to
you
listen to
all.
you. Thank you so much, sir. I would like
Yeah.
to
So thank you.
express our sincere thanks to our Honorable President of Prerna Seva Mandal, Professor R.C. Gulhane, Secretary of Prerna Seva Mandal, Dr. S.C. Gulhane, sir, for their kind permission to conduct this webinar. Their able guidance has always encouraged us. I thank them for their kindness, their interest, and their continuous support. My hearty thanks to our respected director, Dr. Praveen Joshi, Prerna College of Commerce, for his continuous support, motivation, and commitment. Without him, it was impossible for us to conduct this webinar. Thank you, Joshi sir. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to the coordinators of today's program, Dr. Shivani Kattakwar and Mrs. Snehal Rakunde, for arranging such a beautiful program for all the teachers and students. Thank you, Shivani Madam and Snehal Madam. I thank all the heads of departments and faculty for their support for this webinar. I vow Special thanks to the technical department who have worked hard to ensure that this webinar becomes a memorable success. At last, I thank all the dear students for their overwhelming response and the feedback. I'm sure that this webinar will help them to be open to learn, be creative, and stay optimistic to get things better. It will also help them to build relationships instead of having conflicts amongst themselves. So once again, I thank all for making this webinar a resounding success. Thank you once again, all of you. Have a nice day.
Sir, thank you very much. And now, whenever you come to India, please give me a call. We will go to different places.
Wonderful.
And yeah. So you are once again, welcome to India. Please do
And
come.
and please let me know.
On my invitation.
Yes, and please let me know if you get to the United States. If
Yeah,
you
yeah,
get
sure,
close
sure,
to
sure.
Washington D.C.,
I
please
will,
let
I
me
will,
know.
I will visit Virginia also this time,
Okay, and
for
I did.
UP as well.
Okay, and I did put my name and my email address,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
in case anybody wants to contact me.
yeah, yeah,
I
sure.
put it in the comments. So
Right, sir, right,
um,
sir. So nice
yeah,
of
so
you, sir.
okay.
Meeting you, and please sleep well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day. And I look forward to seeing you, to our paths crossing again. Okay, thank you.
Okay, okay, okay.